Hi, this is Circe Olson Woessner. I'm with the Museum of the American Military Family Museum and the Veteran Family Community Collaborative. We're in Tijeras, New Mexico, and today I am joined by two of our collaborative members, Pat Gaston and Spike Murphree, and we are going to be moderating a really exciting program. We've prepared something different. We think you're really going to like this. It's perfect for Women's History Month and baseball fans. You know, we're kicking off spring training soon. And it is our pleasure to introduce author Michelle Y. Green. So hi, Michelle.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Beautiful day in Maryland for a change.
Maryland. Beautiful day, not the deep freeze anymore, huh?
Not anymore.
That's cool. So Michelle, you've been interviewed several times for the museum's podcast. One of my personal favorites was when I interviewed your mom, Willie Pearl Young, and your sister, Adrienne. And for people out there who did not listen to our audio interview with your mom on our podcast site, I want you to go to militaryfamilymuseum.podbean.com and type in Willie Pearl into the search bar and find that interview. It was a lot of fun. You're in for a real treat there. So I want to talk to you about writing today and baseball and women and just whatever comes out of this conversation. I wanted to tell everyone that Michelle wrote a couple of books featuring her mother that's been used in the curriculum in Prince George's County school system. Is it Prince George's County?
Actually, it was used not just in Prince George's County, that's where it started, but before it was over, it was used really across the country. It was adopted during the multicultural, the beginning of the multicultural children's literature movement in the 1980s. And the second book in the series, called Under the Mountain, actually won the Multicultural Book of the Year award.
Well, I have
publishers. Yeah,
I have a copy of it. It's I found it on Amazon. It was like out of print but it was, yeah, it was really, really cute. So I wanted to say, you know, Willie Pearl was a riveter during World War II and married your dad, Eddie Lee Young, who was a Tuskegee Airman.
That's right.
And I know Spike has a question for you.
Okay. Spike? There you are.
Yeah, but we're sort of muted. This whole Zoom stuff has to be worked out the kinks. But anyway, I know Spike had a question, but let me just go ahead because I think he's having technical difficulties. He wanted to know when your dad became a Tuskegee Airman. His name was Eddie Lee Young.
That's right. Yeah.
And when did he become a Tuskegee Airman? Because Spike's dad was in a B-17 bomb group out of Foggia, Italy, and he was wondering when they met.
There's Spike.
Oh, there's Spike.
Yeah. Dad actually joined in September of 1943. And what makes his story so remarkable, he was one of only two who were two Tuskegee Airmen who were triple rated. He was a bombardier navigator and a pilot. And then after the war, he actually became a fighter pilot. There was only 8 gentlemen who joined a special advanced an advanced squadron with Chuck Yeager and flew one of the first supersonic jets. 2 weeks after Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier, my dad went up and had mechanical failure and actually landed his plane with no landing gear. And and he got a collapsed lung and was taken off of flying status temporarily, but he also flew in Korea and served in Vietnam.
Wow. So he was never overseas in World War II then?
He was never overseas during World War II, no. He actually graduated in 1945. And that was the last class of Tuskegee Airmen. So just months before graduation, that's when the war ended. So what they did was they sent him, he was a bombardier, and they sent him to get the advanced training after that.
So Pat, you had a question?
Yeah, I did. I actually have 2. Did your dad ever say why he joined up? And then the other question is, did he talk about what he was most proud about in serving with
Yes.
the Tuskegee Airmen and just his service in general?
Yes, both my mother and father lived in southeastern Kentucky and Appalachia, and they were from coal miners stock. And every
Oh,
afternoon, a mail plane would fly overhead, and everybody would come out into the hollers and look up at the plane. This was a real novelty. So he knew that he wanted to fly every time he saw that plane. He was crazy about flying. So when he graduated from high school, and he went on to college, they were starting to recruit young, educated Black men for the Tuskegee Airmen experiment in flight. And so he took the test. He had to take a test, and he was what they called a 100%er. He got 100% of
wow.
the answers,
Wow.
as did
Holy
many
cow.
of his colleagues, and they called themselves
Okay.
100%ers. So when he left home, he used to always tell us that he left with $3 in his pocket. $3 on the bus, and ended up in Tuskegee. And by the way, these are
Wow.
his pilot's wings. He gave them to me. And so I wear them
Oh,
proud.
that's cool. That's awesome.
Thank
That's
you.
awesome.
And what he was proudest about, he raised three daughters, and he always taught us to have, to really push yourself to the limits, to have high standards, always go after excellence. And he instilled that in us from the very beginning. He expected of all of his grandchildren and everyone. So, for example, I'm on my second advanced degree at Johns Hopkins. I have my master's in writing, and now I'm in the teaching of writing program, and that's the one that I'm working on. The Devil's Bargain, the book about my father.
Oh, nice. Nice. Well, he'd definitely be proud. That's awesome.
Yes.
So Michelle, you just mentioned the book that you're writing about your dad.
Mhm.
I wanted to know how that's going, but first of all, which college did he go to?
He was at the University of Chicago. He had an engineering degree.
Oh, okay. Okay, so how's the book going with your dad and the Devil's Bargain?
It's going very, very well. It has taken, I can't tell you how many years of research, because when he was in Vietnam, he was in special ops. And so a lot of the classified records have just recently, well, not too long ago, have been released. And my sister was, before the pandemic, she was working at the Defense Intelligence Agency and also the Pentagon. So she was able to get a lot of the classified records and was able to funnel them out to me. But to tell you a little bit about the book, it's called The Devil's Bargain because there is a line in the song Woodstock, which is of that era, when the line is, "We're caught in the devil's bargain." It's a description of the Vietnam War. And so the book, The Devil's Bargain, is being told in three voices. The first voice is that of hippies that are going from Haight-Ashbury to Woodstock. The second is a Black woman, a young college graduate, who's in the crux of the Black Power feminist protest movement. And the third is the story of the Vietnam saga of my father. And then the back matter is actually all of the Tuskegee Airmen portion that chronicles his life as a Tuskegee Airman, a fighter pilot, and so forth. So it's like the Tuskegee Airmen part is like the last segment. And I'm doing it as a part of an independent study with Johns Hopkins for this semester. So by May, I'm supposed to have 30,000 words finished. So it's coming along. Yeah.
Wow, wow. So do you have a publisher already for it, or is this like after you get your A plus, then what happens?
Yeah, well, A Strong Right Arm was with what was then called Dial Books for Young Readers. And my contract says any book that I have uh, next it has to be vetted by them next. And now they're a subsidiary of Penguin Putnam. So they'll be the first ones to take a look at it. And hopefully I'll be able to land it with Penguin Putnam. It's going to be a young adult novel. So it's at a higher level than A Strong Right Arm.
Wow. Well, so speaking of publishing and publishers, The Strong Right Arm, you have this book out. It's called The Strong Right Arm, the story of Mamie Peanut Johnson.
Uh-huh.
And it's illustrated by Kadir Nelson.
It is, yeah. When he was just starting out, and now he's with the New Yorker. He does the cover illustrations for the New Yorker, and it's just amazing. But when he was first starting out, he was in his early 20s, and I saw the original painting of the cover and almost fainted. It was just amazing.
Well, he seems to have illustrated a lot of children's books. So is a strong
He
writer
has,
also
yeah.
a children's book?
Yes, he has. And many of them about baseball. We Are the Ship is one of the ones that he illustrated.
Oh,
But yeah, he's amazing.
well,
Awesome.
that's good. I looked at, I don't know where I was Googling him, and awesome artwork.
Yeah,
Just
he is. Yeah.
Excellent. Is it true that you just happened to meet Mamie Johnson in a shop that sells merchandise representing the glorious history of the Negro League?
It was called the Negro Leagues Baseball Shop, and it was in Mitchellville. My son Evan was playing t-ball and not doing very well. So I was out doing errands about 20 minutes from my home, and I saw a grand opening Negro Leagues Baseball Shop. So I stopped in, and it wasn't very large, but it had all kinds of memorabilia. And I was looking for something to encourage Evan, and I went to a rack of t-shirts, and there was a t-shirt with a woman hurling a ball. And I said, this is really interesting. I had never seen this image before. So I bought the t-shirt for myself. And I took it up to the register, and the guy said, would you like this autograph? And I said, of course I would. He said, well, Mamie's in the back of the store. So I went up and got the t-shirt, and I always have my listening ears on as a writer looking for a story, but I didn't want to intimidate her. So I said, has anyone written your story? And she said, I've been waiting for someone to write my story, because of the 3 women who were in the Negro Leagues, there was only one of us alive. I'm the only one left. So we exchanged contact information, and about a week or 2 later, I set up an interview with her, and that's how it started. This is a case of the story finding the author. I hadn't gone looking or doing research. I knew nothing about this. And as a matter of fact, hardly anybody did.
That's a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, it is.
so
It was-
I read a review of your book. Now, you mentioned your kid played t-ball. I read a review of your book that says the author is obviously a baseball fan. Are you?
Yes, I am. But I'll tell you, I had so much to learn. The very first date I had with my husband, Oliver, he lives in Baltimore, a stone's throw from Memorial Stadium where the Orioles played. It was the most dreadful date I ever had. We took a bus from the University of Maryland. We went up to Memorial Stadium, and it was rain. It was pouring, and we were in the nosebleed seats, and it was a no hitter. I mean, I was, please, did anybody do something? I was miserable. But during that time, he kind of explained the semantics of the game. And so years later, well, we got married right after that. And years later, when my youngest son came along, he got really interested in baseball. And so what I did in terms of the research was I actually had to learn how to play baseball, not softball. I had to learn how to play baseball. And so what I did, believe it or not, I would suit up and join Evan's team when they would have their practices. And the coaches would work with me to teach me the different pitches, to teach me how to score, run the bases, the jargon, and all of that. And they knew that I was writing this book. So for about 2 years, that's what I did. I attended every game. I traveled with Mamie. She taught me the pitches that she used to do. We used to go to baseball trading shows together, because I'm the kind of researcher that likes hands-on. I don't like to just Google things. I need to know what the seams of the ball feel like, and how it feels when it smacks against the glove. And so, yeah, I do love baseball, especially now. The Orioles are still my favorite team. The Washington Nationals, of course, and believe it or not, and I hate to say this, the Boston Red Sox, only because they were one of the first teams to adopt my book and had a summer reading program with Verizon and a lot of different sponsors. And they did a whole big promotion with posters, maybe throughout the first pitch at the stadium. They had Jason Veritek, who was the pitcher, actually reading a copy of the book on this huge oversized poster. They did a whole campaign with schools and so forth. So I gotta love my Red Sox, even though my Orioles fans wouldn't want to hear that. And of course, the very next year, they won the World Series. So.
Well, and your dad would be sore distressed, not a Cubs fan.
White Sox.
Oh, you've hurt my heart. Okay.
Well, he was from Chicago. I was born in Chicago, and they were right near the stadium. Yeah, so sorry, White Sox.
So I know you talked a little bit about your hands-on research and you like to touch the ball and go out there and feel. But what does your writing process look like every day? So you're writing a book, you're writing about your dad, you're writing about me. What did you do as a writer?
Okay, I think for every writer it's different. Some people journal first, some people do outlines. With this book that I'm doing with my father, because there's so much in-depth research. For example, I'm doing a lexicon of different terms. I'm doing a musicology of the different songs, the iconic songs. I'm doing photographs, films, documentaries. I'm doing all these different pieces. I was looking for it here, but I actually have an old-fashioned index card file divided into sections with different colors. And every time I stumble on a little nugget, whether it's a documentary like Ken Burns, a soundtrack, some of the new movies that are coming out, like Judas and the Black, what is it? Judas and the Black Messiah. Anyway, there's a new film about the Chicago 7 that deals with these kinds of things. I write them on an index card and annotate them and just, keep shuffling the deck until I know what I'm doing. I don't usually work with a card file. When I did Mamie, I just kept, well, back in those days before everyone had laptops and that kind of thing, I actually recorded her on a microcassette, a lot of the interviews. And so I would just hide the microcassette someplace where it wasn't transparent to her, and she would just talk it out, and we would just sit and have a natural conversation. And then when I got home, I would just kind of transcribe it, maybe take a few notes, but basically I was just paying my attention to her and just soaking in the imagery. The other thing I do, I don't start in a chronological fashion. I write the most compelling part first. And so I start in the middle and work my way out. And a lot of people think, well, that's really, really strange. My professor thought it was strange, but I said, it's the most compelling part to me. And so that's the visceral kind of stuff that I want to get out first. So in this book, The Devil's Bargain, I'm starting from the middle because it involves a Black college student. And when my dad went to war, we were living in Brunswick, Maine. I was just in the middle of high school, which is 3 different high schools. So I started writing the middle part as a middle daughter that was getting involved in the African-American Black Power movement for the very first time. And we were living in Maine, for goodness sake. And before that, Germany and all these different places. So I didn't know a lot about African-American culture at all, not the music, the dress. We were always kind of out of step with that. So I had to do a lot of mining of memories just to even remember what it was like during that era. And so that's where I'm starting and, kind of working my way out. And with Mamie, it's funny, I decided to write the book in first person because I had spent like 3 years with her before I ever started writing the book, just kind of absorbing all of this stuff. And so one day I got quiet and what I heard was Mamie's voice in my ear. It's very difficult to write in first person because you have to kind of use their language, their different kinds of speech, their sentence structure and all that kind of stuff, their dialect. But the very first line I heard was Mama said that I must have been born with a baseball in my hand. And when I heard that, I said, okay, now I found my way in. I think the hardest part for an author is to find that first little nugget that gets her going. And then it started flowing out from there. Once I kind of had the structure of the book in my head, it started flowing. I knew that I was going to write it in her voice. Devil's Bargain is in third person, but several different voices scattered in between.
Wow. So in either book or both books, what were some of the interesting things that you uncovered in your research?
Um, about my father, and this is really neat. I like to tell the story. Uh, we, like I said, he had 3 daughters. He wanted me to be an astronaut. But I found this out from my mother. Back in those days, of course, they didn't have the fathers in the birthing rooms. And when my mother was in labor, my dad was actually in the air. He was flying. And so when I was born, they radioed up to him, "Sir, you have a daughter. What will be her name?" And he radioed down my name from above and said, "Her name will be Michelle." And so when he landed, he wanted to see me for the first time in a suit, but all he had was his flight suit. So what he did is he borrowed a suit from somebody 3 sizes too big. He went running to the hospital, and that's when he saw me for the first time. Um, so that's really, I like the fact that he gave me my name in the air. That's always been
Yeah,
a kind of special thing to me.
that's a great story.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah. And about Mamie, this is one story that I like to tell. She was very fierce. She was she was yay high. I mean, she just wasn't very tall at all, which is why they called her Peanut, because she wasn't intimidated. She wasn't intimidated by anyone, but these big pitchers from the, or big ball players from the other leagues always tried to intimidate her. And when she first started, they would try to slide into her and spike her and trash talk her and all those kinds of things. But she was really combative and she was really strong. One day I came in to interview her and she seemed really upset. And I said, "What's going on?" She said, "Well, I listened to 60 Minutes last night and they had a segment about a woman, a young blonde woman who was playing out in the West somewhere. And they said she was the first woman to play professional baseball. Ilsa Borders was her name." She said, "I was the first woman to play professional baseball." And I said, "Well, what do you want to do?" She said, "They need to be told the truth." Well, as it happened, I was working as a reporter for broadcasting and cable. I was freelancing for broadcasting and cable. So I had all kinds of people in my Rolodex. So I called up 60 Minutes and I said, "You guys made a terrible mistake." I said, "Mamie was the first person and we want a retraction." And they said, "Prove it." And I said, "Okay." I sent them the documentation and I said, "And my deadline is Tuesday. So if you don't correct this mistake," I said, "we're going to follow up with this." And, I threatened them. I said, "You're going to be hearing from my editor." Well, sure enough, that following Sunday on 60 Minutes, they uttered a retraction. At the end of the story, we were watching, they said, "We made a mistake." And they showed her picture, said Mamie Peanut Johnson was the first African-American woman. And that I felt really, really satisfied about that. The other thing about that book, and this was really scary, after working all this time, after researching it, the writing came really, really fast. I think the writing only took me about 3 months. And so it was all finished, ready to go off to the editor. And I said, "I want you to read this book." She says, "I don't want to read it until I can hold it in my hand." I said, "Mamie, I want to make sure that I didn't make any mistakes." She says, "No, I don't want to read it until it's done." So I sent it off to the editor. We fought back and forth for about 6 months because, as it would happen, she was a Yankee fan. So she kept challenging me. And I mean, she was a rabid Yankee fan. So we went back and forth, back and forth. You should see the edits. I mean, it was redlining all through the manuscript. And so finally it came back. We made the corrections and went to page with everything ready. And I said, "Okay, Mamie, here it is on page. I want you to read it before it, prints." She said, "No, I don't want to see it until I can hold it in my hand." So I'm like, "Oh my God." So, they first released, here it is, a strong right arm. There's Kadir's illustration. And when she saw the cover, she said, why did he make my feet so big? I said, Mamie.
Out of all the things, right?
I said, it's a caricature, okay? I said, she said, and my ponytail wasn't that short. I said, that's the illustration. What about the book? And when she read the book, she called me up and she was just crying. She was just crying. And she said, you're not an author, you're my daughter. And that just, every time I think about that, it chokes me up. So her feet were not that big.
That was a valid beef, I'll tell you.
If that's the only thing she found wrong, that's pretty good.
It is. It really is.
Spike? Did you have a question?
Well, I wanted to know, Michelle,
Mhm.
Did the women's baseball teams play alongside the men's? Was there any interaction? Did they play at the same fields?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah, hang on. I had trouble out here. Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Can you hear me now?
I can't.
Okay. Did the women's league and the men's league, was there ever any interaction? Did they play at the same fields?
Well,
Did
in
they
the Negro
hobnob
League,
with any of the players, Josh
in the
Gibson
Negro
or
League, it
Satchel
wasn't a
Paige?
women's league and a men's league. It was just the Negro leagues. And there were 3 women who played in the Negro leagues. Mamie Johnson, Tony Stone, and Connie Morgan. There was not a women's league. Now, Mamie tried out for she wanted to try out for the All-American Girls League from the League of Their Own movie. She wanted to try out. She and her friend Rita went out to they had put an ad in the newspaper in Virginia. So they took the bus over to Virginia for tryouts. And of course, as they approached the field, they were turned away. So when the movie came out, the All-American Girls movie came out, if you remember, there was I think Gina Davis threw the ball and it went over the fence and a Black woman caught it and threw it back. And Mamie believes that that was a nod to her, although they never consulted her about it. And when the real All-American Girls League was inducted into Cooperstown, they invited Mamie to come up there and be inducted in Cooperstown too. And she refused. She said, you didn't want me then, I don't want you now. But the thing is, they actually put my book in Cooperstown. My son, the t-ball player, when he grew up, he and his father went up there and he called me back and says, Mom, a strong right arm is in Cooperstown. So that was pretty exciting, but she refused. And I mean, I don't blame her. Yeah. I think subsequently they did have some tribute to her, maybe a uniform or, a plaque or something, but she was not a part of the permanent exhibit. And she didn't attend the ceremonies or anything. Yeah. Now, let me just mention this. She was on the same team as Hank Aaron, who, as you know, just passed recently. He was actually on the same team with Mamie. And before he went to he went up to the big dance, as they call it.
Wow.
And Satchel Paige taught her how to throw
the reason I asked that question is the very scene you described in the movie is what brought it to mind. That scene when Gina Davis throws the baseball.
Exactly.
The gal catches.
She used to say
that was a small.
She said, "How come I didn't get any royalties?"
But it spoke a lot.
Yeah, she said, how come I didn't get any royalties? They should have consulted me. Speaking of films, by the way, there is Mamie's film is underway. It's called Throw Like a Girl. The script 2 years ago won an Athena Award as the best new script. It's a woman's screenplay competition. And this is being made by Strike a Chord, a small firm in California. And so we're hopeful. With the pandemic, there's been, kind of a slowdown, but they're actually still chomping away at it. It's been a long time, but, we're very hopeful. As a matter of fact, they are working with Lawrence Fishburne on a film this month. And they've invited me to come out and be on scene, but I haven't had my vaccination yet. So we'll see. Hopefully I'm on the short list.
So, Jill, did you write the screenplay then, or?
You know, they asked me to, and I said, I am not a screenplay writer. They said, well, give it a shot. So I wrote a preliminary draft of one section. And, you know, I had the narrative, but I don't have the visual aspect. So what they did is they took my first couple of scenes and expanded it. And what they did, and this is really neat, they're not just telling Mamie's story, they're telling the backstory of how the two of us met. So my voice is one of the narrators. I'm one of the characters in the film. And so is my son, Evan. So that's really cool. It's not just going to be a biopic of Mamie. It's going to be more of a relationship.
Wow.
And that's the difference.
I'm impressed.
So was I. So was I. I never could have come up with, you know, that kind of an idea.
That's why I asked the question of, you know, had maybe been consulted at all about the making of the film? We know now she did not, A League of Their Own, but
yeah,
I was
before she
interested
passed,
in-
she interviewed for the film, and they
Actually,
actually made like a trailer, a teaser of the film before she passed. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is pretty awesome. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. That is pretty cool to be in a film like that, and
Thank you.
not only your voice and words, but your actual voice. That's pretty good. That is awesome. Was there anything that your father or Mamie Johnson told you that resonates with what's going on today in respect to Black people in America?
Both. Yeah, both. I often think if my dad were here, what he would say about the insurrection and the Black Lives Matter. And boy, I think they both would have a lot to say about it. It has to do with respect. It has to do with racial injustice. I mean, it's pretty plain that when soldiers came back, either from World War II or Vietnam, that they were fighting abroad, spilling their blood, and they still weren't respected from home. Right. Dad told the story when he was at Tuskegee, they weren't allowed to go off base very often, but when they did, they made sure they had, you know, their best dressed clothes or their military uniforms, and they would walk down the street and they would be, you know, the N word was hurled in their face all the time. And he said it was very, very hard to keep their composure and just remember who they are. They were the ones that were showing an example, not just to their own race and culture, but to the entire world. And in Mamie's case, she used to say that the Negro Leagues baseball teams had some of the best players out there. I mean, for example, Hank Aaron, I mean, he was the home run king, and he came from the same team. And so, but when they traveled, you know, Jim Crow laws were in effect. They couldn't eat at the restaurants, they couldn't drink at the fountains, they couldn't stay in the hotels. And she used to talk about the fact about the, you know, the racial inequities that were going on at the time. And nothing much has changed in that regard. They were really champions. They were living role models. They were legacies. And these are the stories that our children, not just children of color, but all children need to hear. I mean, we just finished up History Month, but these books,
it's American history.
Stories need to go all year long. For example, just last week, I got an email from a teacher out in across the country, so Montana. And she said, my kids have just finished reading A Strong Right Arm, and some of them are special needs kids. And we've, as a part of our curriculum, we've written a bunch of letters. Could you give me your address so they could send fan mail?
Oh, wow.
And I said, that would be great, but what about a Zoom with your class? And she said, oh my goodness, I can't believe you would do a Zoom. And I said, I would love to. And I said, if you send me the letters ahead of time, then I can respond to their questions on the Zoom. So she got
Nice.
all excited. She emailed me right back, and I said, how many kids are in your school, how in your classroom, how many books? And she told me, I said, I'll cover the postage if you mail the books. I will autograph the books for the kids. And she
Oh,
said, you
nice.
have made an
Nice.
old teacher very, very happy. And I said, no, I'm the one that's blessed. You guys are doing miraculous things with these children with distance learning, especially, can you imagine special needs kids? And so she's just like, oh, I can't believe it, and that just happened this morning. So we're going to be doing that next Friday.
That's great. That
Yeah.
is awesome.
We talked about the good players in the old leagues, Josh Gibson, Satchel Paige, and such. Buck O'Neill
Yes.
wrote a book, and
Yes.
they asked him, did you feel, basically, didn't you feel left out because you couldn't play with the best players in the major leagues?
Mhm.
And his answer was, I played in the Negro leagues, and who's to say I didn't play the best?
Mhm.
That's how he summarized it.
It's true.
Very touching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, there was a little, I don't want to say resentment, but I would say disappointment that many of them weren't called up. But by the time that Jackie Robinson called up, many of the Negro League players had been playing for some time. And I think the biggest disappointment is that when Hank Aaron and the others started being called up, it siphoned off the audiences from the Negro Leagues. And that's one of the things that caused them to fold, because the Black audiences would rather watch Jackie Robinson, Hank Aaron, and some of the others play in the majors than watch the Negro Leagues, because obviously they saw their heroes and they could start watching them on television or listening to the radio, and they didn't go out to the ballpark anymore. And I mean, that was kind of unfortunate. But the Negro Leagues continued until 1963, believe it or not. Yeah. But the museum is awesome, and Mamie is represented down at the Negro Leagues Museum. They have bronze statues of the players, life size, running the bases and that kind of thing. So that's kind of neat.
That was my next question. Is I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth when they were building the museum, and so I wanted to, Mamie or yourself, had you been there, and did Mamie have anything to do with getting it started?
No, she didn't have anything.
You do,
but I worked with them to do a lot of research. Yeah, I got photographs from them. I went down there, of course, for a visit and got to interview some of the people down there. They have a plaque for Mamie. And there was talk of them doing one of the bronze figures of her, but I haven't been able to confirm that. But what I will tell you is that in Washington, D.C., they have named a ballpark after her. She was actually found on Banneker Field next to Howard University. And that's where I went. That's where she was recruited. But they didn't name that after her. They named another it was a whole playground, sports complex after her. Another thing that made her upset, they named a sports complex after her. There was a swimming pool, a track, but no baseball field. And she said, that doesn't make any sense. I said, anyway, and then one of the icons of Washington is a place called Ben's Chili Bowl, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's African-American icon. All the, Obama, it's one of his favorite places. And they have murals on the walls. And right before she passed, they painted a mural of Mamie Peanut Johnson. She's right there with Obama and a couple other. They used to have Bill Cosby. They painted over him and have Mamie on there and a few other pieces. So Mamie is actually there. And, I kind of think that had I not discovered her, that some of these things might not have happened. It's kind of like Black Lives Matter Plaza, where they painted the street. I feel in some ways that having her represented in that way was because of my being able to sniff out a good story and tell it. So that makes me really proud.
Well, you should be.
Thank you.
But you're talking about Mamie being represented in murals and in maybe a statue. I heard she's a bobblehead. Is
Just
she a
wait for you to
bobblehead?
wait for you to get around. Here she is. This is Mamie the bobblehead. Can you see her?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Now, they approached me, the National Bobblehead Museum, actually, it's called the National Bobblehead Museum Hall of Fame. They approached me in October because they wanted to do a promotion with a strong right arm and the bobblehead. And I was like, oh my God, bobbleheads? But these are collectibles. When I think of bobbleheads, I think of those little cheap, things that kids get, like promotional items. These things are collectibles. And because last year was the 100th anniversary of the Negro Leagues, they released limited editions, numbered and signed bobbleheads. And they only had so many of Mamie. They did one of Connie Morgan and Tony Stone, and then they did most of the men. And what was so amazing was they did one of Dr. Fauci, and they'd have Bernie Sanders now. And my mom on The Voice 2 nights ago, she said they have one of it's one of the judges of The Voice. I can't think of his name now. He just got married to Gwen Stefani, I think. But
Oh, the country singer.
yeah, the country.
I'm terrible with names. So.
Blake, yes, Blake Shelton, showing his bobblehead on The Voice. So what they do is when they see an interesting figure or a character, they make bobbleheads, and then most of the people have them sold and donate them the money to a certain cause. Like Dr. Fauci has it to, I don't know, first responders or something like that. So yes, Mamie has her own bobblehead. She sits proudly on my mantle.
Well, she never saw that because I heard, she's passed away. But are you in touch with her family? And what did her family say when they saw her as a bobblehead?
No, sadly, after she passed, her house was sold. And because it was in they'd been gentrifying that whole area. She had a beautiful townhouse, but it was sold. I met many of her family at her funeral, but they were distant relatives. They lived out of town. And the only one left was her husband. And she had a son in Connecticut, whom I never met. So no, we're not in touch anymore, which is a shame.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I guess we can all aspire to become bobbleheads. That means we made it, right?
Well, I have this magnet on my refrigerator that says, you're not really famous until they put your head on a Pez dispenser. So I'd have to be a Pez dispenser.
So where can people buy the strong right arm? I'm assuming Amazon, but where else does one?
Yeah, of course you can get it at Amazon, but I really prefer independent bookstores because they're struggling right now. And in Washington, D.C., my favorite is East Coast Books. And I say that is because when I did my presentation of A Strong Right Arm at the Library of Congress Young Reader Center, they were the suppliers of the books, and they were supposed to hold this is amazing. They were supposed to hold a reception at East Coast Books for me, but I had to leave the Library of Congress dressed in my baseball outfit. And the Library of Congress thing ran me late. I had to drive 2 hours down to Shannon Field to do a Tuskegee Airmen exhibit. So I had to change out of my baseball uniform into my Tuskegee Airmen and get ready to do an exhibit for like 3 or 4 days at their festival. So I didn't even get to attend my own reception, but I would seek out independent booksellers wherever you are, and then Amazon as a last resort, because we need to buy local, especially Black-owned bookstores. If there are Black-owned bookstores in your area, that's who I would recommend. Mahogany Books, places like that.
Well, I'm going to put in a plug for small independent museums too. I was just
Yes,
at a
yes.
conference, and 1/3 of museums are in danger of closing because of the pandemic.
Exactly.
Same thing, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
check out the
Yeah. Definitely. So getting back to your other project with your dad,
Mhm.
what about your dad or his journey or his story stuck with you as a source of inspiration or a guiding principle for you to follow?
Uh, oh gosh, there's so many. Here's probably the best one. Uh, I told you that he was crazy about flying from when he was little, and he was a double dipper. So after he left 27 years in the Air Force, he took a little time off and joined the Navy as a civilian, served another 20 years with
Wow.
Dahlgren,
Wow.
Dahlgren, Virginia, the Dahlgren Naval Surface Weapons Lab, and developed um, weapons for Desert Storm, believe it or not, and got combinations for that. Well, my mother, 96, still alive in Waldorf, he used to drive he has a Jaguar. First he had a Jaguar, then he got a Porsche. And so he was speed demon. So he would drive his Porsche from Waldorf to Dahlgren that would take mere mortals, 45 minutes. He would get there in like maybe 20, 25. But connecting the two places was this huge bridge, one of these arching bridges. It was huge. And we didn't hear this until after he passed. One of his former coworkers, who I was interviewing for some research, said, I want you to know your father never wanted you to know this, but before he hung up his pilot's wings, there's one thing that he wanted to do. He had been taking private pilot lessons without our knowing it. Remember, this is a guy with a collapsed lung. And before he passed, he wanted to buzz the bridge. So he took the plane up, flew under the bridge, hung, and then he said, that's it, that he just wanted to do it one more time. And that's what he did. So, and we found this out much later, he had a passion for what he loved, and he would do it no matter what. And I think, when I found that, I knew that that's the kind of guy that he was, and I'm passionate about writing. I knew I wanted to be a writer since the 5th grade. So I think it's important for our children today to have role models to help them to cultivate whatever their passion might be. It's more challenging in the pandemic than ever, but to try to get them to latch on to what it is, what their voice is, what they want to say, what is their contribution in the world, and help them to grab onto it with both hands and follow through. I'm really proud that both of my sons did that. Evan wanted to be a ball player, but he tore his rotator cuff. And so he also had a love of music. So he went to the Berklee College of Music, and now has his own music company, is a vocal talent in California. My other son went to Drexel in he's a independent documentary filmmaker now, and he just recently joined his brother out in California. Today they do music videos and all kinds of things. So it's another case of nurturing a child's talent when they're young and having them to grow up and to fulfill that promise, and supporting them, and like I do, paying it forward, giving back. I think that's probably something that we all need to do more of during these really troubled times.
Right.
Whatever your talent, whatever your skill, even though you might be in isolation, find ways to connect.
Very good. I like that. I like that.
So I just wanted to, Spike, did you have a question? I know you were thinking. I could see you thinking.
Well, I was just going to ask, did you have a favorite story that he told about, being in the service, either as a Tuskegee Airman or in the regular Air Force?
Mhm.
You've told us some good stories already. If you have another one, I'm willing to listen.
Well,
The one about flying under the bridge takes it all. Holy moly.
Well, let me tell you about one
And then,
of,
of course, naming.
go ahead.
uh,
One of our family
Well,
traditions.
and then, of course, the day you, yeah, the day you were born, he named you from the air.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
there's plenty of good.
He named you from the air.
Yeah.
Well,
That takes the cake. So if you have any,
here's a good one.
other stories, there can be either one of those.
Okay, this is a good one.
If you have
When
it,
my dad came
fire
back,
away.
okay, when my dad came back from Vietnam, as were so many soldiers, you know, he came back with PTSD. That's nothing abnormal about that. But when he had his first grandchildren, he started really mellowing out. And this is amazing. He became a bread baker. He used to had the bread machines, and he started baking bread for the family. And when the kids were little, they were running around. And so what he would do, he took duct tape and taped the plug of the bread maker in the socket so they wouldn't disconnect the socket and ruin the bread, which they did on occasion. And then he started coming up with all these family traditions. And one, which we have on video right before he passed, thank goodness, he started playing the birthday, when someone's birthday, he had the kazoo. He would blow the birthday song on the kazoo. And and it was really elaborate the way that he did it with a lot of flourishes. And so we still have this tradition. Anytime it's someone's birthday, you have to call them up and play the kazoo. So when he was interred at Arlington, I'm looking over in the casket right before they close it. My sister had put a kazoo between his folded hands and a half a stick of gum in his pocket, because he always liked a half a stick of gum, and he would put just half a stick in his pocket. And the story about that is we used to have this horrible dog named Snoopy. He was a dachshund. Dad would come home and lay his uniform shirt on the bed, but sometimes with a half a stick of gum. And we came in there once, and the dog had chewed through the uniform pocket to get to the half a stick of gum. So he was buried with a half a stick of gum and the kazoo in the casket. And that, you know, at first I thought that is so irreverent. And then I thought, no, Dad probably would have gotten a kick about that. The other story was about his actual funeral. My mother and Dad were like Desi. I mean, they were like Lucy and Desi. Their stories together were just amazing, because she was always late. He was always very much on time. And so he used to say, you're going to be late for your own funeral. Well, wouldn't you know, he had his funeral in Waldorf, and everybody was there, and the casket wasn't there. We were all there, and no Dad. And so we called the funeral home, which is just down the street. They had gotten the time mixed up. So we were there for about an hour waiting. And so they finally bring him in, and we're making, everybody's, you know, boo-hooing, and they asked the family to stand up and make remarks. And my sister stood up and she said, all of our lives, he said that Mom was going to be here late for her own funeral. And he said, Dad, looks like you were the one late for your own funeral.
Yeah, and it was Dad. Yeah.
And everybody just cracked up. That was just, it was so funny.
That's good.
That's crazy.
He was probably just rolling around going, yeah, it wasn't my fault though. Oh my goodness. Of all the stories you told, I mean, I have a question, and I think I know how your dad would answer this, but thinking of when he first got into Tuskegee and wearing his uniform, and people were calling the N-word left and right. He comes back from that would be World War II phase. And then he does Vietnam, and they're spitting at people and they're killing people, Black people who have their uniforms on when they come home to their small towns and things like that. And I'm sure he experienced some other sources of racism. Do you think he would have still joined the service knowing all the stuff that he was going to have to put up with?
I do, because he volunteered for Vietnam. After being, he actually volunteered, and we could not believe it. We were in Maine, and you know, I mean, if this is something he would have had a choice of. I mean, obviously he was, you know, he had been in the service for over 20 years at that point. He could have retired, but he decided to go to Vietnam, and then he was in special ops, which was a 4-man team, very covert. He was in a team with a Cambodian, an American, and then, well, they call them Montagnards as scouts, and they were doing things like, you know, assassinations and body snatches, and some of those. He was a communications officer, and they could not be even identified. In fact, they weren't even acknowledged by the government. They couldn't be, and if they were captured, you know,
Yeah.
they were tortured or killed immediately, and there would be no accounting for them. So this was extremely dangerous. But in
Right.
terms of racism, I experienced it firsthand. Our family did, because after we came back from Germany, after not being really exposed to a lot of the racism there, our next tour of duty was Biloxi, Mississippi in 1965.
Mm.
Oh, yeah. So, and we were only there for a short time, but we had to go to school off base at a Catholic school because the base didn't have a school for us. You're pointing to yourself. So once
Yeah,
again,
same thing in my family.
yeah, my sister and I were the only Black students in the Catholic school, and we had to ride the bus through some of the poorest neighborhoods in Biloxi to get there. And I can remember looking out the windows and these Black faces that are all lined up, looking in the bus to us, going like, we don't understand this. And so we found out that the base commander had written a letter to the nuns that said, and I quote, "If a single hair on their heads is disturbed, the wrath of the entire Air Force will descend upon you."
Wow.
Yeah. And so I like to say we got to collect the milk money. We didn't have any
Wow.
trouble from the nuns.
No, I don't think so. I don't think
The
so.
children would always say, you know, make snide remarks about us, but we didn't have any trouble, you know, after that. But it was a scary time to be there.
Yeah,
And,
yeah, for
you
sure.
know, we were pretty much sheltered. They stay on the base, just don't go out into what they call the economy. Don't go out there.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was old enough at that point, you know, I would have been in the 5th and 6th grade. So I mean, I knew what was going on. And then after that, we went to Maine for 5 years. And I said that the only advantage to being Black in Maine at the time was if there was an avalanche, they would find you first.
Hey, if there's one advantage, I'll take it.
There were, you know, now they have a lot of, but at that point, there were no Black people there.
No, no.
For 5 years, and
I
I'm
think
in
they
high
have
school.
5 now.
Yeah, I couldn't get a date. I could, you know, it's pretty tragic.
Interesting. It's interesting to hear the stories from the Brats. You know, Pat's a Brat, and you're a Brat. Mike, you're a Brat, right? I know you're an Air Force veteran, but you're a Brat. No, you're not a Brat, but he's a veteran. And
My father was in the, he left the Army Air Corps in 1945. About the same day my aunt left the Navy in 1945.
Brat. You're a Brat.
And then my aunt settled in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which is, my cousins were born and raised here. Anyway, get to the point, he ended up joining the Air Force Reserve in the 1950s. So he was a reservist, but I was not a Brat that moved around a lot.
Still,
Just to clarify.
still, it's in the blood. It's in the bloodstream, the DNA.
It is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Hey, I wanted to not have your sister get in trouble. I've been here worrying. And you had said earlier she got classified stuff and got it out. She got the declassified stuff and got
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I was like,
My error.
I'm like,
Declassified. She filled in the gaps, but a lot of the records were declassified after a certain length of time, and that's what she was able to get to those records. I mean, just today, she sent me all kinds of documentation, all kind of certifications that I had never seen before. And this is one of my proudest I don't know if you've ever seen this. They don't make this anymore. This is a Tuskegee Airman Ken. Can you see it?
Oh,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow.
When HBO first put out the movie Tuskegee Airmen, the one with Lawrence Fishburne, the library downtown in Washington, D.C., they had a premiere of the film down there. And so they invited the Tuskegee Airmen to come in and screen the film. And my dad was the guest speaker. And I read a copy of the chapter of the book it was called High Flight then. And I had written a chapter about the first time he was in Tuskegee. Excuse me. So I read the chapter. My son, Brian, my oldest son, read the poem High Flight, and my dad spoke. And they had all of the artifacts from the HBO movie there. And we all got t-shirts and hats and stuff. It was really neat. And then part of the artifacts became part of the permanent collection. Oh yeah.
What is that? I can't. Oh, something.
Yeah.
What is
neat.
that? What does that say? I can't read
That's
it.
like, yeah, it's from the film.
Oh, Red Tail Reborn.
They made two. They made Red Tails and they made the Tuskegee Airmen. And Dad screened both of them. And he just sat through the whole thing shaking his head. And he said, it was not like that at all. He said, this was really glorified. But of the two, he liked Red Tails better because it had more of the flying scenes. The Tuskegee Airmen, he thought was a little too melodramatic. But the Red Tails, actually saw them, flying. The Need for Speed, for example. And Colonel Archer was a neighbor of ours. Colonel Archer, when we were in Maine, believe it or not, he was a neighbor. And of course, we knew Ben Davis, Charles McGee. We've been to his house. He's the one that was recently given the Medal of Honor and all that. So, and they have a Tuskegee Airmen chapter here. The East Coast chapter is one of the most prominent. So we still keep in touch.
Cool.
Um,
So Michelle, we need to wrap.
I had,
Oh, go ahead, Spike.
I was just gonna say, I had a phone Zoom with Harold Brown about 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
And he knew, Tuskegee very well. It so
Yeah.
happened, I did some research, and Chuck McGee was an escort pilot for the bomb group, Woessner, in 1944. So August 9th, 1944, my dad was on that mission to Ploesti.
Wow.
So was Chuck McGee.
Yeah.
My dad was in the B-17 and Chuck McGee.
Yeah.
in the T-15.
Yeah. He lives not too.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Well,
I just
the
wanted to
military.
pass that on. Thank you.
I was going to say the military is such a small community, even though there are like 22 million vets. They all know each other. So
Look, how neat.
very cool.
Wow, Kansas City.
Wow, very cool. Michelle, we got to wrap this up, and I was just curious as to, is there anything else you would like our viewers to know that we didn't ask you?
I would like to mention my website, which is www.michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, middle initial Y, last name Green, G-R-E-N. I blog. I have the podcast that you mentioned with my mom and my sister, and I'll be posting other podcasts there. I've been working on Devil's Bargain, and at some point I'll resume blogging and perhaps post a few sample chapters there. But what I really need help with is helping me to interview more Vietnam vets. Most of them are very closed mouth, as you can imagine, but I need to get more of their perspective of the actual war, either the vets themselves or their children and what they remember about their fathers coming home. Any branch of the service. And my other thing, my sister Adrienne, who is the family archivist, said if anybody needs more information, that I should give you her email address if you'd like that.
We'll post it on the bottom of our
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, I'll get
Yeah.
with you and we'll do that. We'll put that, but we can hook you up with some Vietnam vets who are not
That would
afraid
be
of
great.
talking.
Yeah,
Okay.
excellent. Thank you.
All right. Well, I wanted to say thank you, Michelle, for talking
You're
to us
welcome.
today. Say hi to your mom.
I will.
Everybody's got to listen to that podcast. Her mom is amazing.
She is. I just left there a few hours ago. She made homemade rolls.
Oh, 96. Yeah,
Yeah,
she
amazing.
told some funny stories about being a riveter. So I wanted to remind our viewers, as always, the museum's podcasts are supported in part by New Mexico Arts, the New Mexico Humanities Council, Sandia Area Credit Union, and several organizations like Military Brats Registry and Military Brats Seal. And I wanted to thank everybody here on the panel today. You gotta love technology, right? So, thanks a lot, everybody. This has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. High flight.
Yay.